Relax, Maureen, life isn't a charity, my sister smirked, flicking her straw. Ethan deserves the vacation. You don't even have kids. Mom didn't look up from the airline confirmation on her phone. We can't afford 3 kids, anyway, she said, as if I were a price tag and not her daughter. So your sister's son gets the trip. My stepfather snorted. You'll be fine. You always land on your feet. It was the way their laughter moved around me, like chairs scraping tile, like something that told me I didn't belong. I felt the burn in my chest, the ache that comes from smiling through a locked jaw. The iced tea in my hand sweated down my wrist, and I watched the rings spread on the table like bruises. Hi everyone, my name is Maureen Elwood, I'm 27. I'm the daughter who buys the groceries, the plates, the Wi-Fi router when it dies, the one who pays the pest guy because no one else has cash right now. I keep the warranty cards in a showbox under my bed, filed by room, dated in black ink. Because love, at least here, always came with receipts. They kept talking about beach rentals and dolphin boats while Mom waved her hand. Don't be dramatic, Maureen. We just can't afford everything for everyone. Let Ethan feel special for once. For once. As if my life had been glitter and gift bags. As if it hadn't been hours at the cafe, closing shift, thumb blistered from the register, tips folded into careful squares. I'm happy for him, I said, because I've learned that my feelings only count if they make things easier. My sister rolled her eyes, already texting the group chat about bikinis and sunset dinners. I pictured the living room I'd furnished a piece at a time, the grey sofa I'd hauled up 2 flights, the lamp I found at a thrift store and rewired, the bookshelf I assembled on a night I couldn't sleep because Mom had called me excess. Excess. Like I was clutter. The fridge hummed, a thin, steady thread of sound. That hum always soothed me, proof that something in this house cared enough to keep going. I looked at Mom's new carry-on, I bought it last winter when her zipper broke, and my sister's sandals, my Christmas gift, and my heart did that quiet click a lock makes when it finally turns. When the front door swung as the wind shifted, I felt it, a draft that didn't belong, a future that did. I stood, walked to my room, and slid the showbox from under the bed. Receipts rustled like dry leaves. The silver key to the storage unit, strung on a pale blue ribbon, tapped against my palm, a single bell in a church of silence. They were still arguing over whether oceanfront was worth the extra $200. I traced the date on the sofa receipt and imagined an empty outline where it stood, like chalk after a body's been moved. I pressed the cool key to my wrist and breathed in. When you land, I whispered to the showbox, this house will echo. They left 2 days later, Mom, my sister, and her golden boy, Ethan, wheeling their suitcases past the front porch without a glance back. The sound of the car door slamming was my cue. The house exhaled, and for the first time, I could hear my own heartbeat echo in the quiet. I stood in the middle of the living room, sunlight slicing through the curtains in tired strips. The same light that used to make this place look warm now just revealed fingerprints on the glass, stains on the rug, the hollow of a home I'd funded but never owned. Every corner whispered the same truth. I was a guest in my own story. I walked to my room, opened the closet, and stared at the rows of folded sheets, towels, and home supplies I'd bought with extra shifts. Each one was a piece of me, a currency of patience, love, and exhaustion. I wasn't sure if I was angry or just empty. But I knew what I had to do. By afternoon, the showbox receipts had turned into a checklist. I packed the things I'd paid for, the sofa, the lamps, the silver cutlery set Mom called family heirlooms, even though the receipt had my name on it. The TV went into storage weeks ago, waiting for this moment. My best friend, Lila, showed up with her old pickup. You sure? She asked, leaning on the doorframe. I nodded. They said they couldn't afford 3 kids, I said, voice steady. Guess they'll find out what they can't afford now. We worked through the evening, hauling every proof of my effort out of that house. By midnight, the walls looked naked, like the truth had been peeled from them. As I locked the door behind me, the air felt clean. For once, it didn't smell like guilt or expectation. Just wood, dust, and freedom. Outside, the moon hung low over the driveway, pale and quiet. I turned the key one last time, let it click, and whispered, afford that. By the time they landed back from their vacation, Lila and I had already unpacked everything into my new apartment, a small top-floor place above the florist on Pine Street. It wasn't big, but it was mine. The walls still smelled of new paint and possibility. I remember standing in the center of that tiny living room, surrounded by all the things I'd once bought for them, and realizing that every object finally belonged where it was valued. The next morning, Mom's first call came in at 6:14 a.m. Then my sister. Then both. By 7 o'clock, my phone was vibrating non-stop, each buzz angrier than the last. Where is everything? What did you do, Maureen? Are you insane? I sipped my coffee, slow and quiet, watching the steam curl into the cold air. I didn't answer. For once, silence was power, and it tasted better than revenge ever could. By noon, Mom sent a group text. We came home to an empty house. All the furniture is gone. Even the coffee machine. Sister, tell me you didn't take my things. I typed back, everything I bought is with me. You said you couldn't afford 3 kids, so now you don't have to. 10 seconds later, she called. I didn't pick up. Another text followed. This is theft. I replied with a photo of each receipt, one after another, time-stamped, signed, neatly lined up like a silent argument she couldn't win. After that, she didn't text again. That night, Lila and I ordered takeout and sat on the reclaimed sofa watching the city lights flicker through the window. I felt the ache finally unclench in my chest, that feeling of never being enough slowly fading into something lighter. Still, there was a knock at my door before midnight. Not angry this time, hesitant, almost trembling. I opened it to find Ethan, my sister's son, standing there in his travel hoodie, eyes red. Aunt Maureen, he whispered, voice breaking. Grandma and Mom are losing it, and they're saying it's all my fault. The silence that followed was heavier than anything in that empty house ever had been. He stood there, clutching a plastic bag from the airport like it was proof he still belonged somewhere. His cheeks were streaked with dried tears, his hair messy from the flight. I moved aside and let him in without a word. The apartment was dim except for the lamp's golden circle. He stepped in and froze, his eyes darting from the sofa to the shelves. These are Grandma's things, he said softly. No, I replied, setting down my mug. They were mine. I just brought them home. He swallowed, guilt flashing across his face. They said, you lost it. That you're trying to hurt them. I smiled, tired but calm. Then they're finally feeling what I did for years. Ethan sat down, shoulders small under the weight of adult chaos he didn't deserve. They're fighting bad, Aunt Maureen. Grandma threw a plate. Mom's crying, saying you embarrassed her. I leaned on the counter, watching the steam rise from the coffee pot. Funny, I said, how embarrassment only matters when it's theirs. He didn't know what to say, so he pulled something from his bag, a seashell necklace, cheap but beautiful in a child's way. I got this for you, he whispered. I wanted you to come with us. That small gesture cut deeper than all the rest. I knelt beside him, my eyes stinging. You did nothing wrong, Ethan. None of this is your fault. Grown-ups sometimes mistake guilt for love. He looked up. Can I stay here for a bit? They keep yelling. I hate it. My heart clenched, but I nodded. You can stay tonight. But tomorrow, you'll have to tell them you're safe, okay? He curled up on the sofa, asleep within minutes. I stood there, watching him breathe, this innocent boy caught in the wreckage of his mother's pride and my mother's manipulation. Outside, the street light flickered. The city murmured below, cars passing like brief thoughts. I realized then, revenge wasn't loud. It didn't need shouting or chaos. It was quiet. Patient. It let others expose themselves. And they were already starting to. By morning, my phone was a storm of missed calls. 20 from Mom. 12 from my sister. 3 from numbers I didn't recognize, probably her husband, or one of Mom's friends she'd recruited for moral backup. Ethan was still asleep on the couch, tangled in my blanket, his small hand resting over the shell necklace. I brewed coffee quietly, letting the rich scent fill the apartment. The sunlight spilling through the blinds caught the rim of the mug, gold and soft, and for a second, I almost felt peace. Then the pounding began. Maureen, open this door right now. Mom's voice. That sharp, familiar tone that could slice through walls. I didn't move. Ethan stared, confused. Is that Grandma? Yeah, I said softly. But you don't have to answer. The knocking grew harder. Then my sister joined in, shrieking, You're sick. You stole our house. I finally walked to the door and opened it, just enough to see their faces. Mom's lipstick was smudged, her hair wild. My sister's mascara streaked her cheeks like war paint. You had no right. Mom spat. We built that home together. No, I said quietly. I did. Piece by piece. You just lived in it. She blinked, speechless. My sister jumped in. We were family. How could you do this? I met her eyes. Family doesn't mean you get to use me as your second wallet. Ethan appeared behind me, rubbing his eyes. Mom, he whispered. She froze, guilt flickering just long enough to make her look human again. Mom pointed at me like she was casting blame. You've turned him against us. I stepped forward, calm and steady. No. You did that when you taught him kindness was weakness. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Mom's expression cracked, not from anger, but fear. Marin, she said quietly, you'll regret this. I gave her a tired smile. I already did. For 27 years. And then I shut the door. The echo rang longer than her threats ever could. The next few days unfolded like a slow unraveling. Mom stopped calling, but she didn't stop acting. Friends of hers began showing up at the cafe where I worked, pretending to order pastries just to whisper, "You broke your mother's heart." One of them slipped me a note that said, "You should fix this before it's too late." I didn't respond. I'd spent most of my life fixing things, finances, emotions, their constant mess. This time, I was the thing being repaired. Ethan stayed for 3 nights. He helped me water the tiny plants on the windowsill, asking questions like, why do adults lie? And do moms ever say sorry? I didn't have perfect answers, but I tried. Sometimes, I said, they confuse control with love. It's not the same thing. On the 4th night, my sister texted, "Sister, he wants to come home." Ethan saw the message before I did. "Can I?" he asked quietly. I looked at him, that sweet face, that softness I hoped the world wouldn't crush, and nodded. "Yes. But remember what I told you. You didn't do anything wrong. You're allowed to love people who hurt you, but you don't have to stay close enough to let them keep doing it." He hugged me hard before leaving. That hug felt heavier than anything I'd ever packed. When the door closed behind him, the silence was strange, not painful, just vast. Like a wound that had finally stopped bleeding. The next morning, a lawyer's letter arrived. Neat envelope. My mother's handwriting scrawled on the return address. Inside was a printed notice. Return all property within 7 days or face legal action. I smiled faintly, folded the paper, and placed it beside the showbox of receipts. Every piece had a price. Every price had proof. For once, the math was on my side. That evening, I poured a glass of wine, turned on the old lamp I'd rewired myself, and let the city hum outside my window. Revenge didn't feel like fire. It felt like peace. But something in me knew, they weren't finished yet. 2 days later, the storm hit. Not the legal kind, the public kind. Mom went on a social media rampage. She posted pictures of the empty house, crying emojis, long captions about ungrateful children and betrayal by blood. My sister reposted every word, tagging relatives, church friends, even old neighbors. Within hours, my notifications filled with messages like, "How could you do this to your own mother?" I didn't respond to any of them. Silence, again, was my weapon. But then something unexpected happened. People started asking questions. Quietly. In the comments. In private messages. Wait, didn't Marin pay for that house? Didn't she help with your bills? Didn't she cover your medical expenses last year? The narrative cracked. By the next morning, half the posts were deleted. My sister made her account private. Mom posted one last quote about cutting off toxic energy and disappeared offline. Still, it wasn't the digital war that got to me, it was the message that came later that night. From Dad. Not my real father, the man Mom married when I was 12. The one who'd always stayed silent in her shadow. "Dad, I saw what they did to you. You were right to leave. I'm sorry it took me this long to say it." I stared at the screen for a long time, reading that sentence over and over. For years, I thought I'd never hear those words from anyone in that house. The next morning, I mailed him a copy of every receipt, not to prove anything, but to show him the truth she'd buried under guilt. And beneath the stack, I added a note: I didn't take what wasn't mine. I only took back what I'd already given. When I sealed the envelope, I felt lighter. That evening, I got another call, from the lawyer this time. His tone was cautious. "Ms. Elwood, your mother's withdrawing her claim. She's reconsidered." I almost laughed. Reconsidered. The word tasted like justice. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end, not yet. There was one last thing left to say. A week passed before I saw them again. Mom called first, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Can we talk?" she asked. I agreed, mostly out of curiosity. We met at the same cafe where I used to cover her unpaid bills. She sat across from me in the sunlight, hands trembling slightly as she stirred her tea. My sister wasn't there, she'd refused to come. I didn't mind. This wasn't about her anymore. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The clatter of cups and the low hum of voices filled the silence between us. Finally, Mom exhaled. "I didn't realize how much you did for us," she said quietly. "Until it was all gone." I looked at her, at the lines around her mouth that hadn't been there before, at the way guilt softened the edges of her pride. "You didn't lose me," I said. "You just never thought you could." Her eyes shimmered. "I just wanted to give Ethan something special." "And you did," I replied. "You gave him a lesson about what happens when love becomes entitlement." She nodded, tears falling freely now. "I don't expect you to forgive me." "I already did," I said. "That's why I left. I just stopped waiting for you to see me." We sat there in that stillness, two women bound by blood, divided by choices. When she reached across the table, her hand brushed mine. It was a quiet gesture, trembling but real. For the first time in years, I didn't pull away. As I left, I looked back once, not with bitterness, but closure. The weight I'd carried for decades felt lighter, like something sacred had finally been returned. That night, back in my apartment, I lit the lamp I'd rewired, its soft golden glow spreading across the walls. The house no longer smelled of their absence, only of peace. I glanced at the showbox of receipts on the shelf and smiled. Proof not of what I lost, but of everything I reclaimed. Revenge had done its part. The rest was healing.